just round up the evidence, put it in storage.
Y'all fucking idiots. What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Yashay. It's your supreme dream, ready to hit y'all with this motherfucking meme. Let's get into it. And we end up building, man. Simple. We still on this Mr. Ballin'. This probably gonna be the last episode, and if it ain't, we got one more. It's probably gonna be a 4 series, hopefully. 4 videos thing. I'm not trying to have my videos long anymore, so it can be easy to consume. And with that being said, we already been talking for 30 seconds. Let's get into it.
A few moments later.
There's vinegar on her body, as if whoever's done this has attempted to clean her with vinegar. There was no sign of a robbery in the house or ransacking in the house. There was no sign of forced entry. Overall, the investigators said this was a very neat crime scene, as if whoever did this had done this with great intentionality. And so after kind of going through the crime scene, the police really didn't have any leads to go off of, and so this crime went unsolved. And so as these Gainesville police are looking at this report in this VCAP computer system, and they're reading about this unsolved triple homicide, all they can think about is how unbelievably similar the crime scene was to all the crime scenes.
They done had practice, bro. They done perfected their craft, bro. Y'all should have been got these niggas. They done got better. Best way to get better is repeated repetition. Nigga, they done got good at it, bro. Now they just made it look even worse. Fuck!
Of the student slayings, specifically that Julie had been arranged in this kind of suggestive pose like the other female victims in Gainesville. And on top of that, it was determined that the blood type of the killer in Shreveport was type B, same as the killer or killers in Gainesville. So there was a match in the blood type. Somehow, after this discovery through this VCAP program, the media found out about this Shreveport unsolved triple homicide and how apparently it was incredibly similar to all these slayings that have taken place in Gainesville. And so before long, that was all every news network all over the United States was talking about. And at first, the police in Gainesville and anybody involved in this investigation was very upset about this because one, they probably had a leak that someone was giving information to the press.
Bro, it's the news, bro. The news always gonna find a way to find it, bro. They always gonna find a way. They always trying to spread out negativity, bro. Controversy sells. You might as well. Ain't no use in keeping shit like that under wraps. It's gonna come to the light. What's done in the dark, gonna come to the light.
But two, the press was kind of jeopardizing their investigation because by having these details leaked, the killer or killers could potentially benefit from kind of knowing what the police were thinking about and what they were up to. But as it would turn out, this particular leak would prove to be quite fruitful. Shortly after this news about the Shreveport killing and the student slayings was all over the news, this woman named Cindy, who lived in Shreveport, she called the police after watching all the news like everybody else and told the police they really ought to look at this guy, Danny Rawling. Danny Rawling was this 37-year-old drifter who...
Bro, ugly as hell, bro. You be like, if I was to walk up to the bro and be like, what's up, man? He be like, are you ugly as hell, bro? Just cut it off. Just cut it off. Mother Nature was just like, bro, you know, you look better without your hair. Just let it go, bro. Ain't no need to keep it. Or wear a hat. Dang, ugh.
Who was in Shreveport at the time of the Grissom family murders in 1989. And apparently after those murders, he had told Cindy's husband that he, quote, had a problem, and his problem was he liked stabbing people. And Danny literally always walked around with a huge knife on his waist. He seemed totally mentally unstable. And so this claim that he liked stabbing people...
Get on! Is on the pocket. It's on the pocket. I meant to say, that shit is in the pocket and it's gonna be loaded up like a motherfucking rocket. You pull up on me, you getting popped. You feel me? I like stabbing people, and they like. Bet you they still gave that nigga the benefit of the doubt. Fuck. He went up my texture, bro. You just got out of the words.
Cindy and her husband took literally and basically told him to stay away from them. And so in one of their last conversations with Danny actually told Cindy that he planned to leave Shreveport and go someplace where there's lots of beautiful young women that he can just stare at all day long. When police asked Cindy, do you think he's capable of killing all 8 of these people? She said, oh yeah. And so the police turned their attention to Danny and began researching his background, and they discovered he was raised in a very abusive household. Specifically,
he was actually handsome. What's up, bruh? Fuck with your psyche. You, bruh, just leave. Fake can always be like, you're in a bad situation, just leave. You know what they say when you jump off of that plane, bruh, you gotta fall a little bit before they put the parachute, before you open the parachute, bruh. Just leave. Your parachute open, bruh. If you're in a situation where you don't like it, just leave. Your parachute will open.
his father really couldn't stand him. They had a really bad relationship. And then when Danny got old enough, he joined the Air Force, but he was kicked out after 2 years for being mentally unstable. And once he was discharged, he began the string of armed robberies in the 1980s, and he eventually got caught and spent the bulk of the 1980s in prison. And then in 1989, when he got out of prison, he came back to Shreveport and moved in with his parents. Now, this was not a happy homecoming. His parents did not want him living with them, but Danny kind of forced the issue. He had nowhere else to go, and so he wound up living there. And as it happened, they lived less than a half-mile away from the Grissom family home. 6 months after the Grissom family was murdered, and 3 months before the Gainesville student slayings had begun, Danny gets in this huge fight with his father, where his father actually draws a pistol and forces Danny to leave the house and tells him to never come back. And so Danny, he runs out of the house and he gets his gun from his vehicle, comes back inside his house and shoots his father point blank in the head and then in the stomach before fleeing the scene. His father would amazingly survive this attack despite some pretty significant damage to his head, and he would tell the police, and before long there was a warrant for Danny's arrest for attempted murder. But when they went to go arrest him, he was gone. They had no idea where he went. And so as the Gainesville police are looking at Danny's criminal record, they're starting to say to themselves that this guy looks really interesting. He does seem like he could be the serial killer.
Interesting. Interesting. Wow. This nigga tried to kill somebody, bro. He got a warrant out for his arrest. This nigga looks interesting. I would have been trying to get, bruh. This nigga looks interesting.
We're looking for. And so as they continue to dig deeper and deeper, one of the Gainesville police officers suddenly thinks of something. There was this unsolved armed robbery of this bank in Gainesville that happened the same week where all 5 of the students had been killed. A lone masked gunman walked into this bank in broad daylight and demanded money from the teller, and the teller, who thought on their feet,
Bro, is this him? If this is him, bro, you wildin', bro. You was wildin'.
gave him the cash, but it was the type that was booby-trapped with dye packets, meaning if this robber tried to tamper with the money at all, it would detonate, sending dye all over them and kind of making it obvious that this money had been stolen. But the robber doesn't see this. He takes the bag of cash, he leaves the bank and manages to flee and go into the forest before the police show up. And so the police ultimately, they go and search the forest and they find this campsite deep in the woods. And at this campsite, which is abandoned, they don't find the person who robbed the bank, but at this campsite, they find the bag that has the money inside of it, and the dye packet has been activated. So clearly the robber had tried to fiddle with it, and then when it detonated, they had taken off and left the money. And then also at this campsite, near this duffel bag full of ruined money, was a screwdriver, a gun, and an audio recorder. Now, at the time, the police that were seeing this, they were part of this huge effort in Gainesville to stop any more attacks on students and catch the killer or killers. That was all they were thinking about. And so when they didn't immediately catch this robber, they kind of said, you know what? This is a lower priority item than what we're dealing with this loose serial killer or killers. And so let's just round up the evidence, put it in storage.
Y'all fucking idiots. Y'all didn't think. Alright, so the screwdriver is connected. Okay, the screwdriver is here, and it seems like they try to open the door with the screwdriver. Alright, so this might be it. This might be our man trying to get money, and he's hiding out. He doesn't have a place to stay, which means, and he stays in the woods, which would refer good with the other homie. This is how they met up. Okay, now think about it. This man trying to get money to survive. He's in the woods, camped out deep in the woods. This shit is adding up to me. How is it not adding up to you? What's on the voice recorder? That's the only thing that could determine what's going on. Let's check the voice recorder. Like, bro, you gotta get into it, bro. You can't just be like, all right, this is a little priority, and this is we just gonna put this crime above everything else. This nigga just tried to rob a bank, bro, and he has a screwdriver, which could have something to do with another case. Like, bro, y'all gotta be in y'all cases, bro. Like, what police? Up y'all game. It be niggas not doing shit and y'all be on they dick 24/7. But the niggas that's really out here killing shit, y'all out here, you know what I'm saying? Taking your time with it. What y'all got going on?
And somebody else can deal with this after we handle this killer situation. And so no one listened to the audio recording. They just put it in evidence. They grabbed everything else, put it in evidence, and they threw it in the storage room. And so now this Gainesville police officer that's just remembered this unsolved armed robbery, he says to the group that's investigating Danny, he says, you know, hey, since Danny has a penchant for armed robbery, clearly he has a rap sheet full of armed robberies. Maybe if he was the serial killer and he killed all these students, that would have meant he was in Gainesville, and so maybe he committed this armed robbery. And so we should go look at the evidence and listen to that tape. And so the officers, they practically run to the storage locker. They get the evidence from this unsolved armed robbery. They come back and they hit play on this audio recorder. And what they hear is unbelievable. They hear on this recording a man singing a song. It's clearly a song he wrote, and he's singing about being a, quote, mystery killer. And then it kind of segues into him talking about how to effectively kill a deer with a knife, to be really effective with a knife. And he's getting into really graphic detail of how to do that. And then, somewhat unbelievably, on this audio recording, the man identifies himself. He says his name is Danny Rawling. And so this audio recording was huge. It meant Danny Rawling, the guy they're looking at as potentially being the serial killer, was definitely in Gainesville, in the woods near the University of Florida, the same time frame that all of the victims were killed. Also, the screwdriver that had been found at this campsite matched the markings that had been made along the outside of some of the door frames of the victims' homes. They also went into Danny's military records, and it showed he had a blood type of B. So his blood type matched the blood type that had been found in all of the victims' homes. And so just like that, Danny became the number one suspect, and when they went
Look at how he looking, oh Lord.
To figure out where he was, amazingly, they found he was already in custody. He was being held in a jail cell 40 miles south of Gainesville for another armed robbery. And so immediately, Danny was charged in the murders of the 5 Gainesville students. They couldn't charge him for the 3 Shreveport murders because they just didn't have enough evidence. And then after that, Danny was transferred to Florida's maximum security prison to await trial. Initially, Danny said he was innocent, he had nothing to do with the murders, but then almost 4 years later, when his trial was finally starting on the first day of his trial, he surprised everyone in the court when he stood up and said, I'm going to change my plea. I'm guilty on all 5 counts. I did kill all 5 students. He would tell the court the reason he did this is he wanted to be a superstar like the notorious serial killer Ted Bundy, who he looked up to. Danny would also, at another date, confess to killing the 3 Grissom family members in Shreveport. Because of Danny's detailed confessions, we now know all the terrifying details of what actually happened when he killed all 8 of his victims. Back on Friday, November 3rd, 1989, Danny was fired from his job as a waiter at a local restaurant in Shreveport, and so he was frustrated, he was angry, and he was kind of walking around his neighborhood when he decided the way he would kind of channel his frustration was he would go kill some people. And so he was armed with his K-bar knife, which he always carried.
What?
Nigga, meditate. Go find something. Go kill it. Go shoot a deer. Why you gotta kill actual people? You mad? So you just gonna snuff out lives, huh? Snuff out opportunities. That could have been, bruh. Niggas don't think, bruh. That could have been the one nigga, like, the people that you killed could have been the people that helped us make flying cars, bruh. I know I'll be pushing this, bruh. I really want to drive a flying car one day in my lifetime. And y'all just snuffing niggas out, bruh. Snuffing niggas who's really trying to do stuff.
With him, and he found himself standing in front of this little house, and he saw some people moving around inside, and he looked around. There wasn't anyone watching him, and so he just walked up to the front door. He tried the handle, and it was unlocked. And so before he opened the door, he made sure his knife was in hand. He opened the door, walked right in, and he saw Sean, the 8-year-old, sitting on the couch watching TV. And without any hesitation, he walked up behind him and stabbed him through the back, killing him almost instantly. And then Danny walked into the kitchen where he found Tom, the grandfather, who was making steaks out on the back grill. And so he was going back and forth between the kitchen and the grill, kind of getting ready for dinner. And at some point, when Tom came back into the house and was holding steaks in his hand, Danny leapt out and stabbed him, and even though Tom put up a fight, he was very quickly subdued as well. And then after that, Danny made his way upstairs where Julie was, that was Sean's aunt, and she was getting ready for a wedding she was going to attend that night for one of her friends. And so she had just gotten out of her shower, and she was getting ready to put on this red dress she had picked out, and Danny walked into her room, and she most likely saw him, at which point Danny would have told her what he had just done to her loved ones downstairs, and he threatened her with the knife and said, if you don't listen to me, I'm going to do the same thing to you. And because she was terrified, she listened to him, and so he immobilized her, and then he sexually assaulted her, and then he stabbed her to death. Afterwards, he cuts the tape off of her wrists and puts the tape in his pocket, and then he lays her out on her back on her bed, and then he goes downstairs and gets some vinegar and uses the vinegar to attempt to clean her body, to destroy any evidence he might have left behind. And then after cleaning her, he kind of puts her in that lewd, suggestive pose with her hands up over her head and her legs spread, and then he leaves. 6 months later, in August of 1990, after Danny has shot his father and is on the run from the law, he finds himself in Gainesville, Florida, and he sets up this little camp just behind the University of Florida in this thick forest. And then on Friday, August 23rd, as he's sitting out at his campsite, he gets this sudden urge to go kill again. And so he waits for it to get dark out, and then he gets out his audio recorder.
Bloodlust, bro. How the fuck you a real nigga with bloodlust? Like, what? I thought that was some anime shit. You know, like when Hisoka, he was just like, oh, and then he just had his bloodlust on maximum or some shit. And then he was just leaping at niggas trying to kill him. Like, bro, niggas really out here with bloodlust. Wow.
And he records himself alluding to this murder he is about to go perpetrate.
Well, let me sign off for a little bit. I got something I gotta do.
Then, armed with a pistol, a screwdriver, and his K-bar knife, he left his campsite and walked in the darkness in the forest about a mile away until he was looking from inside the forest out towards this 3-story white apartment building. And it's believed that within the last 24 hours, he had been in that area and he had seen 2 young girls go in and out of this apartment building, and that was all he needed to determine who his victims were going to be. And so those victims were Christine Powell and Sonia Larson. And so when he was standing in front of their apartment building, he eventually...
You killed somebody's baby just because you wanted to. Like, this is a super villain. This ain't even human. That's not... Bro, you had no compassion, no love, no nothing. Like, you just didn't give a fuck. Like, you didn't even have a reason. You just did it because you wanted to.
Strode out of the forest. He walked up to that access door that led him into that stairwell. He made his way up to the door of Christine and Sonia, and he used his screwdriver to pop the door open. He went inside and shut the door behind him and walked into the living room, and he found Christine was sleeping on the couch. And so he left her be. He didn't touch her. He went upstairs and he found Sonia sleeping on her bed. And so as he's standing there, realizing that he has these two girls, he needs to make a decision about which one he's going to kill first and which one he's going to sexually assault. And so as he's standing there looking over Sonia's bed, he decides he's going to kill Sonia and then he's going to sexually assault Christine. And so very casually, he walks into Sonia's room. She's fast asleep. She's on her back, and he pulls out a piece of duct tape, and he gets the duct tape in one hand and he pulls his knife out in the other, and he presses the duct tape over her mouth, which wakes her up, and then he drives the knife into her chest. And so Sonia would put up a pretty incredible fight, but ultimately she would succumb to her injuries. And then after she was dead, Danny just left her where she was, and he went downstairs and he found Christine was still asleep on the couch. She had not woken up from the commotion upstairs. And so he walked right in front of her, and standing over her with his knife, he kind of nudged her awake. And when she woke up, he had a piece of tape, he put it over her mouth, and he told her to be quiet and held up the knife and told her that I just killed your roommate, and if you don't listen to what I'm going to say, I'm going to kill you too. And so naturally, she complied to what he wanted. And so she let her wrists be tied, and then at that point, he cut her clothes off, he sexually assaulted her, and then he stabbed her to death. And so after she was dead on the ground, he went and got that towel and that soap, and he began cleaning Christine's body to try to remove any evidence he might have left behind. And then he cut the duct tape off of her wrist and removed the duct tape from her mouth and put those in his pocket. And then he positioned her in that kind of lewd, suggestive position that she was found in. And then Danny went back upstairs and cut the clothes off of Sonia and then positioned her on the side of the bed in a suggestive position as well. And then Danny leaves the apartment. So he goes back into the woods. He walks in the wood line back to his campsite. But when he got there, he was just too jacked up. He was too excited from what he had just done that he just couldn't control himself. All he wanted to do was go out and kill again. And so he managed to sit at his campsite for a total of 8 hours before he couldn't help it any longer. He had to go back out and find another victim. And so his next victim, he decided, would be this woman he just happened to see a couple of days ago. He was walking down the road near this row of apartments near the school, and he looked into one of them, and he just saw there was this girl in this apartment, and he just thought for a second, I bet she lives alone there. But that was the entire interaction. He didn't know this person. He was just kind of guessing that she might be alone in there. And so here he is in the forest after killing these two teens. And he's like, okay, I'm going to go back to that apartment because I think that woman is alone. And that woman would be Krista Hoyt. And so in the early morning hours of Saturday, August 24th, Danny leaves his campsite with his screwdriver, his gun.
You disgusting. Disgusting, man. I'll spit on your grave.
And his K-bar knife, and he walks about a half mile away from his campsite until he's still in the woods, but he's looking out at the back of Krista's apartment. And then at some point, he walks out of the forest, he walks right up over her fence and gets up to her back sliding door. He uses his screwdriver to pop the sliding door open. He slides it open, he steps inside, and he finds out that Krista is actually not in her apartment. There's no one in her apartment. But instead of leaving and finding another victim, he decides he'll just wait for Krista. And so he shuts the sliding back door and he goes into her bedroom closet and shuts the closet and then just waits. And he stays in her closet for several hours until around 11 a.m. that morning. Krista comes home, and when she was in the house, he waited a little bit longer to make sure she didn't know he was there. And then at some point, he kind of slipped out of the closet, snuck up behind her, and put her in a chokehold. Now, at first, Krista tried to fight back, but eventually she realized she could not overpower whoever this was. And at that point, she said, okay, what do you want? And Danny would tell her, you got to listen to me or I'm going to kill you. And he showed her the knife. And so Krista said, okay. And she put her wrists out. He taped her wrists with duct tape. He put tape over her mouth. And then he brought her into her bedroom where he cut her clothes off and sexually assaulted her. And then afterwards, he stabbed her to death. Once she was dead, he cut the duct tape off of her wrists and pulled the duct tape off of her mouth and put that duct tape in his pocket. And then he positioned her body on the bed in a suggestive position.
Bro, like, why ain't you just, you know what I'm saying? You had a rough life. Okay, I understand. You had a rough life. But instead of killing the people, why ain't you just like try and talk to them? Like, you gonna kill them anyway. You know what I'm saying? You already had that dead set in your mind. Why ain't you just like try to get some counseling from them, like, or something? At least like give them a second to like, so you can understand the person that you're finna kill, or do something. Like, bruh, you just a disgusting human. You're not a human, bruh. You just a disgusting entity. You're not. No, that ain't it.
Before he left. When he got back to his campsite, he realized he had accidentally left his wallet in Krista's apartment. And so, calm as can be, he walked back through the forest, right back into Krista's apartment. He found his wallet and he was about to leave when he thought to himself, well, wait a minute, I should mutilate her body. And so he pulled Krista's body off of the bed and using his knife, he decapitated her. He put her head up on the shelf next to the bed, and then he repositioned her body on the edge of the bed, making it seem like she was kind of hunched over, looking out the back door. And then before he left, he reached up and twisted her decapitated head and made it seem like it was looking down at the rest of her body. 48 hours later, on the evening of Monday, August 27th, Danny was back at his campsite out in the woods, and he suddenly got the urge to go kill again. And so he stood up, he grabbed his knife, his screwdriver, and his gun, and he walked away from camp, made it about a mile through the woods until he was standing still in the forest looking out at this big apartment complex that was very commonly occupied by college students. And so at some point he leaves the forest and walks up to the first apartment he sees. He has no idea who's going to be in there, and he goes up to their sliding back glass door. He gets his screwdriver out and he pops it open. He slides the door open, he steps inside, and the first thing he sees is Manny Taboda, this big, strong former football player who's laying in his bed. And Danny just walks over and starts stabbing him, and Manny wakes up and puts up one heck of a fight, but ultimately Danny is able to overpower him and kills him. While Danny was stabbing Manny, the other resident inside of this apartment, 23-year-old Tracy Paulus, she was in the shower, and so she gets out of the shower and she hears all this commotion down the hall, and so she steps into the hall and she looks into Manny's room and she sees Danny on top of him stabbing him. And so Danny looks back, he sees Tracy, Tracy screams, she runs down the hall into her bedroom, she slams the door behind her, she locks it, and then she leans up against the door to try to keep it shut. Meanwhile, Danny just continues to stab Manny until Manny is dead. And then Danny stands up and he just walks down the hall, calm as can be. He gets to the bedroom door where he knows Tracy is. She's trapped, she can't go anywhere, and he begins to smash the door down. He's ramming it with his shoulder, he's kicking it.
Bro, you should have used, damn, shawty, you could have survived. You should have went out. You should have locked that door, went out the window, and just like went to your neighbors, like went to another dorm room and talked to them. And be like, I just see this dude just, my roommate just got stabbed. Can I use your phone? Type shit. Dang, shawty, you could have lived.
Over and over again, and Tracy's screaming for him to stop, but eventually he manages to just kick the door down.
Run, bitch! Run!
And as soon as he's inside the room, Tracy kind of stands back and she says to Danny, "Are you the one?" And Danny looks at her and says, "Yes, I am the one." And then he threatened her with the knife and said, "I'll kill you just like the guy down the hall unless you listen to me." And so Tracy listened. She got her wrists bound and her face bound. And then Danny...
What? I'm not, bruh. I don't feel bad for it, but that is amazing last words. Are you the one? That's so fucked up. Damn, that's fucked up. That's your last.
He cut the clothes off of her and then sexually assaulted her, and then he stabbed her to death. And then after she was dead, he cut the duct tape off of her wrists and removed the duct tape from her mouth, and then positioned her body in a suggestive sexual position on the edge of the bed, and then he left. Later that day, Danny would rob that bank in Gainesville, and then 1 month later, Danny would be arrested for a botched armed robbery 40 miles south of Gainesville, and then while he was in prison, he would find out he was being charged with the 5 murders in Gainesville. 16 years later, at 6 p.m. on October 25th, 2006, Danny Rawling was led into the execution chamber in Florida State Prison. He offered no apology to the family members of his victims that were on the other side of the glass. Instead, Danny just sang a religious hymn to himself in order to comfort himself. And then 13 minutes later, Danny was pronounced dead. He was executed via lethal injection.
That's too good for him, bro. That's way too good of a death for him. No. They ain't end right. I feel like his family got justice for what he did, but it's just like, bro, death was too sweet for you, bro. They should have, I don't know. They should let the family torture him. That's fucked up. Cause he just killed them people for no reason. Didn't give a fuck. That's wild. But with that being said, this is the end of the video. It's been your boy, Y'all Shay. And if you ain't welcome nowhere else, you're welcome here. High tier reaction. Just need a better camera so y'all can see my face better. You feel me? But with that being said, I hope y'all like, subscribe, join the motherfucking army. And with that being said, your boy is out. Leave a comment.